Hello, and welcome back to the Relationship Clinic podcast. I'm Renee Natvig, your host, and today we continue our series, Divorcing with Dignity. My special guest today is attorney Amy Goodblatt. Amy graduated from Brown University and Emory University School of Law. She was admitted to the bar in Massachusetts in 1985 and in the Florida bar in 1990. Her law firm, Goodblatt, Leo, specializes in family law, family mediation, collaborative law, bankruptcy, and government law. She has been a family mediator since 1993 and has conducted over 500 mediations, both at the trial level and appellate level. She was a code board attorney for the city of Longwood from 1994 to 2009 and has been the city of Longwood Code Enforcement Special Magistrate since 2010. Amy has expertise in complex family litigation and commercial litigation, as well as bankruptcy. She offers practical and goal-oriented representation in family law and in bankruptcy matters, including divorce, Chapter 7, Chapter 13, mediation, and general litigation. And she also speaks Spanish and French. She's a master of the Central Florida Family Law Inns of Court, a former president of Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida, and a current member of the Collaborative Family Law Group of Central Florida. I hope you enjoy our next interview. Well, welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Renee. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I was, as I've been getting to know you and I looked through your website, what struck me was that you have a lot of financial kind of bankruptcy, commercial, as well as family law. And I was just wondering how that might play into the type of law you practice. Like, what are you most interested in?
So the part of law that I really like, I like logic, and I like being resolution and solution oriented for people. So one of the things understanding numbers and money is looking at options. So it's getting opportunities, giving people opportunities. People often say, what's the answer? I want this amount of alimony, I want this amount of child support, I want this, or this. And they're very linear in their thinking. Okay. They want only one thing. And one of the things about understanding money and finances is that it encourages you to be more creative, believe it or not. It's because you can look at different options financially. You might, for example, not want to pay alimony, but if you realize that if you have alimony before the end of this year and you agree to pay it, it's tax deductible to you. So having a financial background and understanding options for people helps them. Another example in the bankruptcy arena, a lot of people have more debt than they can handle as a family. And if their family splits up, I can assist them to realize, why argue over debt no one's going to pay? There's an option for you, and that could be bankruptcy, which means you could clean up debt and then focus on how you're handling things with your children. So just
so that bankruptcy option can come up in the divorce.
In a divorce, you can actually, until the time the judge has actually divorced you, you can be in the middle of a divorce, and a family can still file bankruptcy as a couple, discharge debts, and move forward with their lives so that they're not arguing about debts that neither party can afford.
Oh, wow. So those are...
So a lot. Just having that knowledge sometimes gives people the release to be able to settle their problems, because what's really causing them not to be able to settle and what's causing that big impediment is that there's an elephant in the room. And that elephant in the room might be the finances. And so, or the elephant in the room might be an affair. And so I guess having solutions for people, and I consider myself very solution oriented in looking at people, where does this person want to be and how many ways can I show them to get there?
So you as a solutions person, it maybe as a therapist, I'm thinking, wow, where did that skill come from? What I don't know. I'm just...
It's hard to say. I mean, I know, like I said, I like logic puzzles. I've always really enjoyed logic and trying to figure things out. I speak 3 or 4 languages, and so there may be just a part of my brain that works that way. But I find it the most gratifying of what I do. And I think people, as I said, most people come in looking for one answer. I want this done and I want
the
X.
right way or the way.
And to show them that based on who that person is, the same facts can result in a different outcome because someone else wants something different. People ask me, what do you think, or what would you want if you were in my shoes? It doesn't matter what I want. It matters what you want. And my job is to show you a way to get as close to what you want as you possibly can. And having that financial knowledge might assist you in looking at something differently. So another example would be in the bankruptcy arena, taxes that are over 3 years old are dischargeable in bankruptcy. So you might have someone who's tax debt back from 2002. They filed the returns. There's some qualifications to that, but they're walking around saddled with $50,000 in tax debt. They may be able to write it off and then move on with, as I said, resolving things like child custody issues and those sorts of things, that there was something, an elephant in the room that kept them from resolving. And as much information as I have and as much background I can bring to the table really helps them.
Wow. So the elephant in the room can be financial. What other elephants in the room do you...
Well, there's lots of them. And as I was thinking about coming to talk to you today about collaborative practice, and one of the questions you and I had talked about, you were going to ask me was, why does collaborative work? In which cases is it the most successful? And I decided to tell you that it's the elephant in the room cases, which almost every family breaking up has an elephant in the room.
Okay.
And the elephant in the room is what's keeping the parties from being able to resolve their dispute. Most of the time, it's not the facts of the case. The facts of the case are generally things like, how many cars do you have? What do you owe on them? What are your work hours? How many children do you have? Excuse me. The elephant in the room is the something that causes people not to be able to reach resolution or to handle the issues. So it could be emotional. It could be that someone's had an affair. And so even though you're trying really hard to divide up your pots and pans, you can't do it because you're still really mad. The elephant in the room could be spending. It could be someone who secretly spends monies on an affair they're having, going to strip clubs, things of that nature, and not spending money on a child who has special needs. And so the elephant in the room is the thing that's keeping people from resolving the issues at hand, because there's something very sensitive and highly emotionally charged that needs to be handled in a proper way. And so one of the things that I really like about the collaborative divorce process is that it offers families an opportunity, a way to deal with the elephant in the room creatively, not ignore it, not put it aside, but with 4 professionals who are trained to talk about how to help this family with the elephant in the room so that we can address the things that will allow them to move forward.
So having that support really system to move into that highly charged, maybe emotional, meaning-filled kind of elephant helps people actually.
Well, people who are trained in those areas can help you. So when 2 lawyers sit down and they know there's an elephant in the room, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. You become an amateur one when you do this as long as I have, but I'm also not an accountant. I don't know tax advantaged ways to do everything, and so we seek out professionals, but it's really nice when you have one therapist working with both sides to address the elephant in the room, or one financial saying, how about this solution? So an example might be, I worked with a woman in a case where there was a small family-owned business, and she was having a hard time. She and her husband were breaking up, and she felt very strongly that she wanted the business to remain in her family, but their adult children did not want the business. Her husband would have to buy her out, but he didn't have enough money. There wasn't enough money to do that, and she didn't want to sell the business and have a stranger come in and resolve that buy out the business because she felt strongly, but she couldn't work with her husband as a divorced family. So through a financial professional in the process, we were able to create an employee stock-owned purchase plan, so that the employees actually bought her one half of the business from her, and they owned it with her husband. So she felt like the families, that her employees were family members. And so she was okay with them doing the buyout. And that was through a financial professional who suggested it for both sides. The husband got to continue owning his half. The wife went to people that she trusted and had known for years. Maybe they weren't her children, but they were acceptable to her, as opposed to selling to a stranger or a third party, because she was reluctant to resolve the case because she didn't want to see the business she had worked on for so many years and contributed to. So that's where a financial professional could come in and say, I have a solution that might work for both of you. And they sold one half the business to the employees who bought the wife out.
That's a beautiful example of creativity that allows what's so meaningful to both people to be solved for. Yeah. So as far as you've done different types of law, and we're talking today about divorcing with dignity. In, I guess, just kind of broadening that, what do you think brings dignity to divorce, or is collaborative the way that feels most helpful?
Well, I think it allows everyone. I think collaborative allows everyone to preserve dignity in the process, because generally when people's families break up and there is a divorce pending, and obviously collaborative is used for other areas of law, but primarily divorce, people are emotionally usually not in the same place. Very rarely, although it does happen, both people come to the table, we've both been thinking about this for 2 years and we decided today we want to get divorced. Someone is usually further along in the process than the other person. And so the idea about having dignity in the process, someone may be very emotional, may be a wreck, may cry frequently, may have emotional outbursts, may be angry because they're working through their feelings. They didn't see it coming, or maybe they put it aside. And so you do have a mental health professional on your team who works with that person to enable them to sit at the table and to work with the other spouse to get them to find a way that they can communicate with that person that is accepting of that person's dignity and their role at the table, and doesn't hear their emotionalism as just being weakness. Or if you have a boisterous person, you may have someone who sucks the air out of the room. They just talk constantly, and the other person just cowering in the corner. We meet as professionals before every collaborative team meeting, half an hour before and a half an hour after. We even set the table where everyone sits to make sure everyone is heard. How do we deal with the interrupter, the spouse who never stops talking and the spouse who never gets to talk? How do we encourage that person to speak at the table? So that's the kind of dignity that you can work on. We're all aware of it. We set the table for success before we get there, and we look at what issues. And then afterwards we talk about what went well at that meeting, what didn't go well at that meeting, and was someone left out? Did someone misbehave? And we can pull people out of the room. If you see things going downhill, the mental health neutral usually will say, let's take a break. And the other person doesn't have to know why we're taking a break. So it's really kind of a good, I think it really helps people preserve their dignity in that process, doing it that way.
Yeah, I'm thinking, as you said, if we see it going downhill, it's interesting to think about what downhill might mean in a collaborative process versus what downhill might mean in, a litigated process, or right? There's very different goals about what's.
Well, and in collaborative, you can stop. So when you're in litigation, you can't just say to the judge, take 5. It doesn't work that way. But you have trained professionals at the table recognizing someone's losing it. They're not able to sit at the table. They're getting angry. They're agitated. Maybe their foot's going up and down, and you can perceive that we need to take 5 minutes. Or you can have a prearranged signal from one of the members on the team that if they see something going afoul, we use collaborative even in domestic violence cases. If you see that someone is shooting a look across the room at someone, well, judge isn't going to be sensitive to that in a courtroom. They're just listening to the evidence. It's a very different role. Here we I talk about setting the table for success quite often in collaborative. That's what your team does, is try to set the table for success so that everyone is heard. And we look for signs and signals, and it's an ongoing process managed tightly by the professionals to make sure that both parties get through the process in an even-handed manner.
You've said set the table a couple times. Something we haven't talked in this podcast yet necessarily is, how is that table set? Like, just to give people a maybe a visual as to what they're doing.
It's a physical thing. So how you set the table refers to a couple things. There's how is this meeting going to work? How are we going to make this a productive day? We're going to have a tough topic to tackle today. So today's topic might be alimony, and that's a tough topic because the payor doesn't really want to pay alimony and the recipient is afraid of incurring the wrath of their spouse. So they're setting the table physically. So sometimes we'll arrange it so that people might be a round table, so that we're not opposing each other. We may decide that the attorney should not be looking the other client, in the other spouse in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the attorneys are friends in the room, and we set things up so they're not sitting next to each other, so it doesn't look like they're buddy-buddy. Mm-hmm. So you really try to take a look at the dynamics of the room and situate people in such a way that the conversation will flow. The mental health person might be very close to both parties so that he or she can look them in the eye when they're having a tough time and get them to focus on them, not their spouse, because that may be difficult for them to do. Mm-hmm. So we talk about physically where everyone's going to sit, right down to what the table, if it's round, if it's going to be a rectangle. We may have someone sitting in the corner. You may have a note taker in your session, and that person may or may not be sitting at the table. There may be too much clutter. So I've had a case where someone moved out of state in the middle of the case, sort of an overnight thing, and that person Skyped in, and we had to talk about where we were going to put, we had used an iPad, not a full screen, where we're going to put that person so they were fully present at the meeting. So what's really nice about the collaborative process is you can be flexible, but it's purposeful. Everything you do, when I talk about setting the table, is purposeful. Our purpose is to make sure everyone feels comfortable in the process and is heard.
Yes, everybody feels heard, right? Because it's one thing to go, yeah, well, I said that, but it's another to feel like people, what they're saying is being heard by an entire group of people. And if for some reason somebody notices that they're not getting that sense, then you can
time out.
Adjust, time out either for them emotionally that they need that, to kind of just gather themselves to bring their best selves to that process.
Right, to look at all the factors that facilitate everyone feeling like they had a fair shake and that they were really involved in the process. And it may mean that the husband and wife should be looking at each other. It may mean that they shouldn't be looking at each other at all while in the room. But we try physically to set things up so that it's best for them, where people's goals in the collaborative process at the very beginning, we create goals. Each party states what their goals are going to be in the process, and they're very carefully crafted goals. They're generally pretty macro goals. Where do I want to be when this is over? What do I care about? And not just goals for myself sometimes, but goals for the other person. I want the other person to be happy. I want them to be self-sufficient. I want our children not to be affected by the divorce. And we actually post those goals in the room. And after the first meeting, they could be on a piece of paper that's posted each time or on a poster board. They could be projected depending on what you do. But often we refer back to those goals at future meetings when things get kind of hot and heavy or emotional. Sometimes we plan and put certain goals intentionally, deliberately in a place where the mental health neutral can quickly point back to that goal and say, remember we talked about this at the beginning, we're kind of straying for that goal, or how does what you just said help us reach that goal, to get everyone thinking again. And we can revise the goals as you go along in the process. Your goals when you start a collaborative case may be different as you think about it and as you proceed through the case.
Yes, maybe even as you experience having that collaborative, or we're both, we're being supported in both of us to get what we need and want. I wonder how, as far as people changing their goals, getting bringing back that sense of, this is a person that I've cared about, right? We don't have to be adversarial. We really can support each other even though we're ending this relationship. So
part of the process is really thinking through those emotions. I've had clients reconcile in the course of collaborative. It wasn't their goal at the beginning, but that does happen. And I think part of the process was as they started exploring where they wanted to be, these folks realized maybe they weren't so sure it was over for them. And they had gotten bogged down with some other white elephants in the room. There was an affair, and they quickly jumped into a process. And as they started talking about their goals and their respect for one another and their roles in the family, so they had relationships with each other's family, they were close with their in-laws, and they didn't want to one of their goals was not to sever those relationships, and just to stay close, for the wife to stay close to her father's mother and to her husband's mother, vice versa. And they really talked around, we want to be able to continue to have Thanksgiving together. And I think as they started looking at the things that they wanted to do as they were crafting their time sharing with their child, who was 16 or so close to the end of his minority, they started realizing we want to do all the things together that a family does, and it sort of led them back to one another. Now, that wasn't a goal. And sometimes at the beginning, people aren't capable of generating goals other than very sort of micro goals.
Okay.
So, for example, someone may be really angry. They found out their spouse is having an affair, and they will try to articulate a goal that's inappropriate, like, my goal is for my child never to spend a night or be in a picture with the new wife or the new girlfriend or something of that nature. And so we really do work on making the goals acceptable at the table, but maybe reworking that goal into something that would satisfy this person's need, which is, I want to make sure that my child knows that she has a family, two families, one here and a home there, that I won't be excluded, that the other house won't be so much nicer because there's a mom and a dad, that she's going to look at my house and there's just a mom and feel like
I won't lose my importance.
Right, that their house has more toys in it. Maybe there's a financial imbalance, maybe, and because those are fears, and that's really where she was coming from. She was angry and hurt, but a lot of it was she was afraid that this child would see this other woman as her mother, and her role would not be preserved. So that's not something people are able to realize at the beginning. The professionals might recognize it, but the goals changed for this woman as we went through the process. And it's a fluid process, and so I think that's part of, when you talk about setting the table, is things constantly change. We have interruptions. I mentioned earlier that in the middle of a case, we had a woman who relocated to Texas. The wife just she wanted to go, but she just said, I'm out. And so we talked about, would the process continue? And everyone was willing to continue it with her away. And actually, in that case, it worked much better. They had been high school sweethearts. My client was the husband, and he was very tightly allied with her and found it very difficult to be in a room with her because she wanted the divorce. It was very hurtful and emotionally difficult for him. And he actually did better with her being far away, participating in the process. I think physically even being present was difficult for him. And so while it's important to be in the room together, that's another thing, setting the table for success. Maybe there are times when on a given day we're going to hit a topic, someone's presence, maybe the closeness 2 or 3 feet apart is too much. It's overwhelming for those people. And that's where I'm saying the sky's the limit in terms of creativity in a collaborative process.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how incredibly supportive that is to have. So we've got these 2 attorneys, the mental health, the financial, and 2 people trying to bring their best selves, right? All of that energy towards trying to resolve something in the best way possible.
Well, that sounds a little idyllic. So when most people come to the process, the participants don't really understand it. They don't really understand how is this going to work. And they have to be convinced by participating that the process itself is very important in moving people forward, staying in the process. We're not negotiating. We don't go to the table and haggle. It's not a mediation where you come in day 1 and we have a goal to get it over with in 2 hours. There again, people are not necessarily there to drag things out, but there's a process that has to be followed. People have to be prepared to come to the table. There's homework after every meeting, so it's not like we're just chit-chatting at every meeting. It's a tightly regulated process where we create a list of what the agenda is going to be. It's timed, so the meetings don't go on forever. There's a certain amount of time set aside for each meeting, so we stick to a clock. We schedule meetings out in advance. We ask people to respect that and try not to cancel or change, so you can rely on that for your work calendar, your home calendar. And there's certain homework that has to be done. And the professionals are all available to you between meetings. So we might not meet for 3 or 4 weeks, but in between, you may be working with the financial neutral on options for child support, alimony, dividing assets, dealing with some tax issues, valuing businesses, those sorts of things with your lawyer or without, or providing documents. And the financial professional can help us get to the next meeting by calling the attorney perhaps and saying, hey, your client's not giving me his or her stuff. We're not going to be prepared for next time. Or your client's really having a tough time. I met him or her and they're not really understanding. We need to talk about how we can bring this financial information down to a level he or she can digest. Maybe we need to bring in an allied professional. So sometimes in a case you might find that someone isn't financially sophisticated because their partner did all of the finances. So you might find that you want to hire someone who's collaboratively trained as an allied neutral to help that person, again, fully participate at the table. And that person is dedicated not to negotiating a solution, but explaining things to them, explaining when you divide retirement accounts, why you can't just pull the money out because there'll be a tax consequence to that. Understanding if you are going to receive alimony and taxable alimony too, that you have to pay estimated quarterly taxes. Understanding that when you divide retirements, they're also tax affected. And what does that mean? That when you go to take that dollar out of that retirement account when you're 60, you're going to pay tax on it. So that dollar might be worth 85 cents to you when you take it out. So understanding those concepts and not feeling at the table like you're a lesser participant because everyone else in the room seems to understand. So when we detect those sorts of imbalances, we try to provide financial support. Sometimes people want to look important at the table, and then when they come back and they talk to the professionals, they may confess to the mental health professional, I really don't understand anything about the money. And I really don't know what I'm getting here. I just trust my lawyer. So that's important to know, for us to know, so that you have someone dedicated to your understanding who's not negotiating for you, but rather is explaining, so that when you come to the table, you don't feel like a second-class citizen.
And those allied professionals can also provide options, right? In addition to explaining things, they may have some suggestions.
So one common area, sometimes we have someone there for the children. Sometimes you have diverse children's issues. You may have blended family issues, whatever they are. And sometimes teams have recognized that the children somehow need a voice. They don't come to the collaborative team meetings, but you may have 2-year-old and a 15-year-old with very different needs. You may have a special needs child. So I've done 3 collaborative cases in which there have been at various ages special needs children, and it's a really nice way to be able to deal with these issues. And we've had to bring in allied professionals who can talk us about estate planning, special needs trusts, how you plan for a child past age 21, what we need to do for this child, and often it's informational. SSDI, explaining those things to the team, because you may have an 8-year-old realizing this child is never going to be self-supporting. Let's talk about this now instead of waiting till the last minute. Let's put things in place. What are the options? What are the tax consequences? So that's an allied neutral that we might agree as a team. We need to bring someone to the table that everyone can agree to talk to us, to give us information so that we're intelligent in an area we may not know about. So, I mean, it's unlimited as far as who that allied neutral can be, but it can either be to bring one person to the table to help them get through the process, or it can be someone to help the entire team become educated on a topic, so that we all feel like we're dealing with things intelligently.
And planning for the future. That's another thing I think about collaborative, is that as you're discussing things, it's not just, what we're trying to divide up now, or how the children are going to be supported right now, emotionally or time sharing wise, but to really have the opportunity to think through what does this mean for our future, and to build that in, right?
Well, and so one thing about collaborative, another thing that's really nice is that we're your team forever if you want us to be. So in our collaborative agreements, if something comes up down the road, so relocation is an issue with children. So right now everybody might live in Central Florida, but someone gets a great job offer to move to Seattle. And typically in a litigated case, in the traditional model, you'd file a petition to relocate. You've got 30 days for a temporary order, and then you go to court months later, and meanwhile the child's in school and everyone's angry and everyone's stressed out, and you have to give an answer to your job offer. This is something where you can call a member of the collaborative team and say, hey team, you know us, you know our situation, this has come up, can we get together and address this? I'm using that as an example.
Right.
So we are your collaborative team, and we know you, and we're there to assist you again if you have an issue, as long as it's not litigated, and you're trying to work out a solution. These are folks who know you and know where you're coming from, and you trust and worked with before, who can jump into action to try to help you with whatever challenges that come up later on.
And that is a place, I think, a situation where if you've gone all the way through this process, you've gained trust in the ability to solve, for this process to solve things, so that even if something like that pretty significant comes up, you're moving into that process with that
that sense
confidence.
Of yes,
in the people that are working with you, and you may not know what the solution is, but
right.
Again,
you've worked through many things that you didn't know what the solution was.
Correct.
Right?
And that's the other thing, is that collaborative isn't just for initial proceedings. It's not just I want a divorce, and that's the only way to use that. Whether it's partners breaking up, business partners breaking up, people in relationships they haven't married for whatever reason, but also modifications. You may find that your original case was done in a litigation model, but you're now looking to modify, whether it's your support or whatever the issues are. You can still use the collaborative model. And if you're in a litigated case, you can decide halfway through, this really isn't working, it's taking up a lot of time, it's not going anywhere. You can always transition to the collaborative model. We now have a collaborative statute in Florida. It prescribes how things are done. And if the attorneys are willing to do that, the case can be changed or the issues can be reconfigured for a collaborative model. Because often people are angry at the beginning, then they get into litigation and realize it's going to take 4 months to get a hearing for me to talk to a judge about this. They don't realize that the timetable. I wrote a blog recently about why is my divorce taking so long. People don't realize. I noticed a case for trial in Seminole County in June for a day, and the trial date I was assigned is February of the following year.
Wow.
A one-day trial. It's not like I needed 3 weeks or anything.
Yes.
And people don't realize that. And every judge, it varies judge to judge what that timetable is like. So we told the court we're ready, and now we have to wait months and months and months and months. And you have to spend a lot of money staying fresh on what the issues are. It's not like you're not going to remember from June what the issues are. You have to stay current, you have to update things. It's expensive and it's stressful. You're not getting resolution all that period of time
in limbo. Yeah.
And what's nice about the collaborative process, its timing also can work around your schedule. So if you are someone who travels a lot for business, we can work around your travel schedule. Or if summers are tough for you and we have meeting, and perhaps June and July are really tough months because children are home and you're torn or you've got an assignment somewhere, we can suspend meeting for a period of time and everyone can work individually or by phone or do the things that they have to do. Or we need to meet quickly because someone has that job somewhere else. I did have a collaborative case where someone was moving to Hong Kong, and we needed to get it done quickly. So when we selected team members, one of the things the professional team did was we screened. The two attorneys screened. We said to the professionals, do you have time in your schedule in the next 8 weeks to schedule 3 or 4 team meetings that are going to go 3 hours in length, because this couple needs to have their issues resolved fairly quickly. And if you don't, we think you'd be perfect for the team, but let us know now.
Right.
And so I think that again, that's how we can accommodate. Very rarely is a court going to say you're leaving for Hong Kong, so we're going to drop everything we're doing for you. So I think that's kind of, you can pick and choose the professionals who would be able to accommodate your particular need.
Just so much leeway, so much. And you said, that the picture I painted was a little idyllic, right? So what's not so idyllic? If you wanted to let people know, hey, these are some risks to really to think about, and as you're considering options. I know you do tons of mediation as well, so maybe. So
yeah, I think there are things you need to be prepared for, which is sometimes I think people feel like, well, we've given them this sort of beautiful image of what a collaborative case is, and everyone gets a voice at the table, and everything the professional team has worked on is going to go hunky-dory. Well, people are still people, and everyone has a bad day. That includes the professionals. You can have a rogue professional, who's just having a bad day, who goes out of process and starts advocating a position as opposed to offering options, and someone feels that they're being put upon, or someone comes in ornery, or the process takes a while. For whatever reason, things get postponed. Someone has a death in the family, and so things get postponed, and people are expecting this nice, orderly process to occur, and something comes out of left field. Or people feel that the solution's going to be quicker. I often have people ask me, how many meetings is it going to take to get this done? My answer sometimes is it depends, sometimes on the slowest person in the room, but also how well everyone does their homework. So I've been involved in cases where we've agreed to accommodate a family who wanted to know what the budget would be for the collaborative case, to do it a certain number of dollars for a certain number of team meetings. But if the work and the work in between was all included, but if we were going to have to go to a 4th meeting, it was going to cost X. And so by the time we got to meeting 2 or meeting 3, some homework wasn't getting done. So we were communicating with the participants saying, we will need a 4th meeting. It will cost you this amount of money unless you get the work done for meetings 2 and 3. And they didn't, but they agreed to pay for that 4th meeting. But that's an impediment, is that I think people feel that it's going to, they may say, oh, the first meeting, nothing got done. It didn't get resolved, because people may have an unrealistic notion of resolution, how quick it will be. And that it's not going to be perfect, that there are going to be times that it's going to be emotionally difficult for you, or you're going to be unhappy with what's being said. You may, we all try to be as neutral as we can. Sometimes lawyers are trained advocates, and sometimes they have to be pulled aside and say, and someone has to say to an attorney, you stepped out of process here. You didn't assume that you're not acting in a collaborative manner. You're acting like a litigator. Someone might slip, for example, and say, well, in court, this is what a judge would do. That's a typical slip up, because people say that in mediation all the time. To kind
of convince, or to...
So to educate. So, for example, when we reach a tough topic in collaborative, like alimony, frequently to help people deal with impasse or issues that just seem to, they get stuck. One of the tools in our toolbox, and there are many, is for the attorneys to agree beforehand. They're going to do a presentation on the law, and what usually we'll do to try to make it more even-handed is I will take the other client's position, and the other attorney will take my client's position just for the presentation. So I might represent the client who wants to receive alimony, but I might be talking from a payor's position, the benefits of resolving in 2018 versus 2019, talking about the duration of the alimony, talking about family support versus undifferentiated support versus alimony and child support, whereas the other person might be talking from my client's perspective. So it's interesting so we switch it up a little bit, but we keep it very, very factual to try to get people unstuck. And there's a lot of techniques you can use for that, but that's one of them. So it's an educational thing. But then you might have someone slip up and say, but in a case like this, a judge would never order alimony more than 6 years. And then everyone's eyes get wide. And
oh, we're stepping
because no one's perfect.
Right.
But we do all try. But sometimes people apologize. I mean, there's a lot of forgiveness in this process. So sometimes we've had people walk out of the meeting, and the meeting's just over. And the mental health, we will always check up on our participants right after the meeting. Typically, as both attorneys will check in after. There are a lot of preparation meetings beforehand. How are you doing? How did that go for you? I've left meetings where the professionals thought it was a great meeting, and I call my client, and the client says, oh, it was terrible. And I hate, what didn't you like? Because they didn't understand something, or vice versa. We thought it was terrible, and they thought it was great. So the idea is we try to stay in touch with one another. But the duration and the expense. Sometimes the family circumstances change. They get into the process, and someone loses their job. And so suddenly they're not able to afford what they were able to do, and they're nervous and concerned about it. And teams can accommodate you on those things, and we can make adjustments to try to work things through in a way that will help you get through the process without dropping you. But things do change, and so that can be a source of frustration.
Okay. So yes, it has a lot of benefits to it, and it's not a perfect process, but it's almost like the process then allows for that, right? That imperfection that's going to show up.
Well, I think as professionals who've done this for a long time, one of the things I really like about it is there's no one way it's going to go. We're all going to sit down and continuously work on it. It's a living being, this family dynamic, and we're going to try to always meet whatever comes their way. So whatever pitch is thrown at them, we're going to try to find them a way to hit. So if it's a curveball, that's okay, and if it's a fastball, that's okay. We're going to try to talk about ways to kind of go with the flow and help them get through it. Now, that being said, so to follow up on something you were saying, there are people for whom the collaborative process is not suitable. And I would say it's probably far less than you would think, but I will tell you that it's not a good process if someone is deliberately entering the process to be abusive to the other person, to run up the legal fees so the other person is drained financially, or if they're deliberately deceptive. Now, that doesn't mean that someone doesn't want to pay as much, or they might not be as forthcoming as they should be. But if you're asked to produce documents and you're saying, I'm not turning them over, I'm going to hide them, if you know from the get-go, and lawyers are usually the first ones to screen for this when you are interviewing people.
Okay.
And we're now required by the Florida Supreme Court to offer collaborative as an alternative. We talk to future family clients, what options are there for me in the system for me to terminate my marriage and so forth. We talk about collaborative. I look for certain screeners. If this is someone who says, I want to say the least, give the least information, and hope they don't find out, and if I feel that person is immutable on that point, then that's someone who the collaborative process is not going to work well for, because transparency is a part of the process in which you have to agree that what you're going to say, you'll have attorney-client privilege with your attorney, but there is transparency, so you can't lie. I can talk to the other attorney. You can't come to the table and lie. And if I recognize I've got someone who isn't going to be willing to listen at all, now that doesn't mean everyone's perfect, but if you're going to come to the table and say, well, I'm only going to tell them about 2 pieces of real estate and I'll hide the other one, if they're telling me that as a lawyer, I'm not going to tell them about this, and I can't convince the person, that's not a suitable candidate for collaborative, because we don't have punitive measures in collaborative. We don't have a judge to say, you're in contempt for not producing that document. So while the pains and penalties of perjury still apply, so if someone lied in the process and got through it, and years later, because it's still, there's still judges still have to approve your collaborative agreements, so you still have a court order. No one should feel like this is just a private thing where there's no judge involved. So if you found out 5 years later, you still have the assurance to say this person lied and in their disclosure they didn't disclose these assets. You still have the right to go back and look at that through the legal process. But generally, we do try to screen for those things so that you don't put someone in the process and commit resources, time, and finances the parties to a process when someone or both parties are just not going to be good participants. But it's very few people. Most people with some understanding of what their roles are, who want to participate in the process, get into it for the right reasons.
Okay. And then maybe speaking just a little bit to, as I work with entrepreneurial couples and families, some people are finding their way into therapy with that. What an opportunity as well, if they are needing some legal support, that this collaborative process can be helpful. Have you worked with any more entrepreneurial businesses that are separating, maybe even as a family, or just they're strictly business partners?
I have not done a pure business partner breakup, but it would be the ideal process for it. So if you had business, in fact, I just recently had someone ask me about that. Yes, there are financial issues, but there's no reason collaborative is limited to divorce per se or breaking up of a family. So there's now a strong movement doing collaborative in the probate and estate planning area. So you have people fighting over
siblings or children.
Ashes. People fighting over ashes. It's really some of the same sorts of issues. But anything where you have two sides to a dispute who are looking for solutions that involve professionals, professional assistance. Because remember, you're hiring, one of the unique things about this process is you're hiring one financial professional, not to advocate for side, but to offer options. That's a huge savings for people. So if your business is breaking up and you're hiring a financial neutral or a financial expert to advocate and for your lawyer, and the other side is hiring an expert for them, you can have 2 experts, dueling experts, and so you're spending a lot of money. Whereas if you all agree, perhaps you have attorneys and you have a financial expert, one, to provide you options that are goal-oriented. It certainly works in the business arena, and would be perfect to do that. And the mental health neutral component is still important, because it isn't, some people say, oh, well, I'm not crazy, I don't need that. But the orchestration of the emotions are the same. I'm the business is ending, I'm sad about it, I'm angry about it. Perhaps there was malfeasance, someone took money off the books. I mean, all of those same things that come up, a lack of trust usually underlies a breakup of a business. Again, just like a divorce, it's very rare that businesses break up just because everyone decides, you know what, today we're going to quit.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. There's usually someone's unhappy with the other party. Either they're not carrying their weight, or they've done some wrongdoing, or they've messed with the books, or whatever that is. But so helpful to be solution oriented. And if you have one financial saying, look, these are the facts, this is what's going on, help us look at some options that'll work for us perfect process to do
Right.
that in.
And then probate things too. I once sat in where a judge was speaking about how there was this picture, and that both are a piece of artwork, and that the siblings were bound and determined, both of them, that they were going to have that piece of artwork. And he said, well, the only thing I can do is split it, I can cut it down the middle for you. Do you guys want me to do that? Or do you want to try to come up with a solution? And of course, that's very hard on your own when you're just fighting for that picture, but then to be supported in the process.
Well, and that's why, that's sort of that King Solomon approach.
Yes,
you're hoping for the outcome.
right,
but
right.
again, and that's more of a mediation type approach. What do you do? Whereas in collaborative, it's different because you're looking at all the various tax advantaged options for that business and how, or that family. As I mentioned earlier to you about the business who was bought out by employees. So, they bought out one side. So the idea of looking at creative solutions that meet everyone's needs. What are their goals? My goal is to be, is to not work with my spouse in the business any longer, but I don't want the business to go to a third party outside my family. But the employees who work for me for 20 years, they're my family, and they could buy out my interest. And so my husband keeps his job. I have people I love and care about buying out my share of the business. So I think that that's where a tax professional, a financial professional, having one is much better than having two professionals, because they're too busy getting to the answer, your answer. You hire someone to find what you want them to find, the other side finds what they want them to find, as opposed to looking at ways
detail,
to bring it together.
Like that's fact or whatever.
Correct.
Versus
it's not about winning, it's about finding a solution.
Yeah. Well, that's I think that's a beautiful place to maybe pause today. People will be able to get your information about your practice as they access this podcast, but maybe if you can share with people where they can find you, your contact information.
Great. So the easiest way to find me is my telephone number, which is 407-228-7007. My office is located near Fashion Square Mall, but you can go to my website, www.agoodblatt.com. You can also just Google Amy Goodblatt, you'll find me there. There's a lot of information on my website about collaborative law, bankruptcy law, divorce. I'm also a certified family law mediator, and I use all the same skills in mediation that I use in collaborative. And I think you'll find some of the same approaches. And we work with all kinds of people, from very, very wealthy people to people of all income levels. And so I really enjoy what I do, and I hope that you would consider us as you're looking for someone to assist you with whatever issues you might have.
Great.
Thanks, Renee, so much for asking me to do this. I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Thanks for being here.